quiet space. He said, but I've never had any training in it or anything. And I'm not really talking here about training or any formal way of doing it. Just taking the time to quietly go within and access that highest part of yourself is something that spiritual beings know is absolutely, without qualification, necessary to be able to manifest real magic. Whereas the non-spiritual being just sees that as something they don't have time for. They've got things to get done. I can't imagine my life without meditation. A few years ago, I couldn't imagine my life with it. I don't know how else to reach the higher self, how else to reach the unified field. See, at the level of where your mind is working, say right now, if you're driving along or listening to this tape in some way, the level that your mind is working is at the analytical level. You analyze it. I call it the chatter level. And you discover how slimy your mind really is at this level. It's what I think of as intellectual violence, this analysis. You picking that apart and picking this apart and drawing that and having these conversations with yourself. And it's like you're tearing everything apart in your mind. And it's almost intellectually a violent thing to do, to tear apart and to pick apart. And that's the way your mind works at this, say, the surface level. And we're doing this all the time, analyzing this and figuring out that and so on. But there's another way of processing your world, and that's through what's the opposite of analysis, which is synthesis. Analysis is to tear apart, pick apart. Synthesis is to bring together and put everything together. Now, as you go a level down from the surface of your mind, you go past analysis, and you get to the synthesis level where you can start to bring everything that happened to you in your life together. And then you get to a point where you stop the analyzing, and your goal is now to just have silence. But then you want to get past just the silence, and you want to get to a place where you can empty your mind. Just empty it. But the only thing you have to do this with is your mind, so that becomes a gigantic paradox. So now what you're looking for is really a quiet mind. And when you keep going down in this level, it's almost like thinking of the mind as like the ocean. And at the top of the ocean is the surface. And at the surface, there's all of these disruptions. Down 2 feet. If there's a windstorm, if there's something that comes along, you'll see that there's disturbances at the top. And the very surface, all these disturbances. And there's ducks that land on it. And there's all kinds of waves and the wind and the tides and all of this affected. Then you go down a little bit further, more stillness. And you keep going down further, and you keep down deeper and deeper and deeper into it until you reach this place that I have been calling the unified field, which I didn't originate that by any means. And in this unified field, all things are possible. And there's like a physiological changes that take place. So your objective in meditating is really to get to this transcendent stage where you can get past chatter, and you can get past analysis, and you can get past synthesis, and you can get past thoughts, and you can get to empty it, and then you can get it to be very, very quiet and very still. Now, there are as many ways to do that as there are people to do it. There's a right way, a wrong way. In Real Magic, in the book, I have written at length about how I do it and what is important to me. I've even talked about it on other tapes that I've produced here at Nightingale Conant. I don't think there's a right and wrong way to meditate. I don't think there's a proper or improper way to do it. Giving yourself the time to do it and to know that it can be of benefit and value to you, that's really the crucial thing. You've heard me tell the story of the tennis ball, of this miracle of being able to, and the question becomes, how can you meditate? How can anyone meditate during a tennis match? The fact is that some of the greatest players in the world who have ever played the game, who have that very peaceful way, are practicing a form of deep, intense concentration, which can only be described as a meditative kind of technique, where you are pushing out all distractions, where you are repeating inwardly what they call a mantra, which is the only purpose of a mantra is to keep your mind straight and focused and not to let extraneous things come in. And it's a way of disciplining the mind. So you endlessly repeat the same kind of phrase, and it keeps you more disciplined. And in the middle of a tennis match or in the middle of anything that you're doing, if you're in a golf match or if you're in a business meeting or whatever, you can go within and bring your mind to this alpha state. And when you get to this alpha state, which is a very peaceful kind of thing, you can feel yourself making contact with that divine presence that I've been talking about. It is a very, very powerful tool and a very powerful technique that you can implement at any time in your life. It isn't just for that period when you're alone. It's in the middle of chaos. You can find yourself the very peaceful, at ease person. You can develop that inner candle flame that doesn't flicker, though the worst goes before you. Whatever's going around out of you can't affect that candle flame. It's in the unified field where all things are possible and where you're always in the right place at the right time. This is really just giving yourself quiet time. If you get the training, if you can get someone to train you who is an expert in it, that's by far, I think, the best way to do it. But you don't need someone to tell you how to do it. Essentially, it's something that you have to do alone, and you have to remove the doubt that it's something that is there for you. And then you can access it in the middle of the most chaotic times and find yourself at peace. The eighth of these spiritual dozens that are necessary in order for you to be able to see real magic coming into your life in this new alignment is the spiritual being sees intuition as something that is real, as something that is valid, and something to hone and that you can learn to trust. The non-spiritual being sees intuition as sort of unpredictable hunches, just happenstance kinds of things that your mind, which is filled with these racing kinds of ideas all the time, is constantly giving you advice, and that it's not really anything that you can use and hone and make use of in your own life. So for the spiritual being, that intuitive kind of knowing that overwhelms you at a particular moment, like whether to turn this way or that way, or whether to buy this or whether not to, or whether to make that phone call or whether to not make it, or whether to make this appearance or not do it, or whether to make this business decision. You can't define this. You can't scientifically say where did it come from or how did it get here or what does it mean. But when it's overwhelming and strong and powerful, the spiritual being goes with it, trusts it, and sees it truly as God talking to him. If it isn't absurd for you to believe that sitting quietly in your mind and praying, that is, having a one-way conversation with God, that if that seems like normal and a sensible thing to do, and something like 95% of the people in the Western world do that, then why does it seem so absurd that you wouldn't get a return call? And the intuitive person believes that that overwhelming inner kind of that thought, that consciousness, that real thing that they're experiencing is God talking. And it's like when you get quiet and peaceful and surrender, that the right direction will come right in your way, that will keep you purposeful and keep you on track in your life. Whereas the non-spiritual being sees that as just a lot of hogwash. Basically, they see it as you add up all the positives, you add up all the negatives, and if the positives outweigh the negatives, then there's your decision. And you put it all into a computer, and you rationalize it, and that's it. And any intuitive hunch that they may have, it's just happenstance. It's just part of the chaos of the mind. So one believes in the chaos of the mind. The other believes that the mind has no chaos in it, and that parents, mothers particularly, in caring for their young, have powerful intuitive hunches about what is right or what is not right, or whether their child may be in trouble or may not be in trouble, and they rarely ignore it. My wife, for example, will in a moment, say, "Where's the baby?" And check right now. And I'll say, "Well, I'm sure." "No, check right now." And sure enough, there might have been something that she might have been up ready to put some Roman cleanser into her mouth, or she might have been ready to, do something that was harmful to her. And she has learned, after having given birth to 7 children, that her intuition is right, even about when the baby is to be delivered, when she was pregnant, and when to push, and when to all of these kind of things. Mothers generally do not ignore this. You come to know that there's a connection, an invisible connection between you and your child, and a woman very often will trust that. And what's interesting in families where the wife will die or whether there will be a divorce and the father now has to take over, that intuition suddenly gets very honed and the man begins to pick up the same kind of notion,